I hope you don't mind if I speak in English. I decided, not to translate this into Italian because it's a work that is performed and written in English. So I will, of course, you will see that some concepts are remaining in Italian, and of course you can also ask questions in Italian and make discussions and questions in Italian. So thank you for introducing me. My paper indeed is entitled Il Cavaliere che resta in noi, and then this very long subtitle. Yes, I will explain a little bit later what this title means and why I chose to use the Il Cavaliere che resta in noi. So to give you a little bit of introduction to my presentation, what I will do today is I keep giving you a summary of my research. Then I will present what happens within the framework of Maschile Plurale and how it works on different levels, which means as a network of men's groups, as a national association, and as a group practice among men. I will focus on the group practice that the interviewees of Maschile Plurale refer to as raccontarsi come uomini a partire da sé. And then I will look at how this practice is performed in most of the men groups in order to deconstruct the dominant norms of masculinity, and starting with blowing out the silence on men and masculinity, silenzio maschile. Stressing the epistemological relevance of this practice, so partire da sé. I argue that this practice offers men the opportunity to separate themselves as gendered, embodied and partial subjects. Finally, I will talk about the potential that I can see in this practice, and I would like, or the potential that I would like to see in this practice of raccontarsi come uomini, so gendering men, in raising men's gender awareness, because I see this as an important step towards the possibility to engender changes on personal, epistemological, and political levels. And then I will give you some examples. So my research on Maschile Plurale has been an interdisciplinary one, grounded within the framework of my master thesis at the graduate gender program at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. I collected my research material between the year 2010 2011, and it's nice that this presentation is like right follow-up from Giovanna's, because then you already have the kind of context. I know that you already have it, but that it's And on a methodological level, I have combined discursive analysis of texts, letters, articles, and public appeals published by the network with empirical findings coming from my own participation at national meetings and discussion groups. Moreover, semi-structured in-depth interviews with some of the members of the network allowed me to dig more deeply into the complexity and diversity of the issues that are at stake. As a researcher, my interest has been and is about investigating the strategies of change developed by activist groups. We examine the concepts and the practices adopted by members of men's groups and networks such as Maschile Plurale in Italy and in other countries. In this case, my research explores in what ways individual men can deconstruct and transform the subject position of abstract masculinity, which can be translated as masculinità universale. With this term, I mean a gender-neutral speaking position that traditionally claimed universality and disembodiment while coming from a determined subject position that became the norm, namely the one of a rational, white, European, male, heterosexual, able-bodied property owner, and so on. We know that various feminist theories in political theory, epistemology, philosophy have criticized this vision of the modern subject from the perspective of women and other marginal subject positions of embodied others. So sexual difference theory, black feminism, queer theory, post-colonial critique. However, the question becomes, what happens when we try to deconstruct the center from the position of the center itself, which means from this very position of white heterosexual men? For those of you that have never heard of Maschile Plurale, it might be helpful to think about the majority of the members as heterosexual men or identifying heterosexual men in their 40s or 50s, highly educated and sometimes already involved in other kinds of leftist-oriented political activity. This is, of course, a generalization, and we plurality within the network is indeed a crucial element that is worth exploring further in my field of research, which means I need to do more interviews and more fieldwork to dig into this complexity. On the other hand, in this presentation I want to focus on the possibility of starting a process of gender awareness from the normative perspective of heterosexual men, whose experience and perspective have always passed unquestioned and invisible, conflating with the norm. Therefore, with the case studies provided by Maschile Plurale as a frame of activism in which men are stimulated to rethink masculinity and gender norms starting from themselves, the main questions at stake are 1. Understood as moving away from the centrality and universality of abstract masculinity, what does it mean for heterosexual men to engender critical gender awareness a partire da sé? What does it do on the level of deconstructing dominant masculinity and engendering more equalitarian practices among men and women and among masculinities? In order to answer those questions, I should tell you a little bit more about the men's network Maschile Plurale. I don't know how familiar you are with this network, but I think it's helpful to give some descriptive elements about this, where it comes from and how it works, keeping in mind that being active at different levels through different groups, the work of this network is necessarily plural and in continuous movement. Maschile Plurale became an national association in 2007 after a successful mobilization of men against gender-based violence in November 2006. The association has been founded a few years ago. Nevertheless, it has been since the mid-80s that in different Italian cities, men have gathered in small groups in order to share and discuss their personal experience of masculinity. Inspired by the Italian second wave feminist practice of partire da sé, the group practice with which Maschile Plurale started the activity is indeed the one of raccontarsi come uomini a partire da sé in small groups. This practice points at the personal dimension of one's embodied and gendered experience as a place of power relation, offering a space for self-reflexivity. Therefore, it can become a political practice, similar to feminist consciousness rising. I mean, similar but not symmetrical, and of course, not the same. Slowly, the activity of the group grew into a network, and this is the present situation that you see in this screenshot. Currently, the groups that are active within the network are from Torino, Verona, Bologna, Viareggio, Roma, Bari, the group La Ragazza di Benin City, Pinerolo, Livorno, Milano, the group Identità Differenza, and Smascheramenti from Bologna. Summarizing, we could say that Maschile Plurale works at multiple interrelated levels. As a group practice among men, as I was saying, allowing men to rethink and discuss their experiences a partire da sé. As a network connecting the initiatives and events organized by various men groups in different Italian towns, and as a national association to share initiatives and political appeals in relation to political institutions and other associations, and to participate at demonstrations. Through the practice of raccontarsi come uomini a partire da sé, the members try to deconstruct what they call il silenzio maschile. What is this? The difficulty of heterosexual men to speak about themselves from a partial location and in a self-reflexive manner. The difficulty is to see themselves as gendered instead of speaking for everybody. As one of my interviews explained, and here I read a quote, "For men, it is very difficult. It is a very difficult thing to speak about the personal life. Even more difficult it is to share within a group of other men, being there, sitting down together and looking into each other's faces, while talking about oneself. It is something that really provokes a change in your life. Primarily because it transforms the way men used to relate to one another." This practice can be itself a moment in which cultural norms of masculinity are questioned and interrogated. Let me show you, for example, the interesting contribution of another interviewee when we discussed the potential of change implicit in the practice of raccontarsi come uomini. His answer is affirmative and illuminating, especially in relation to reconfiguring my relationship with one another as before. And here I read this quote. Speaking among men, parlare fra uomini, provokes changes because it lets you confront with other stories, with other racconti di sé, and stimulate the act of listening. Learning to listen is a very difficult practice, you know, for us, men. On the contrary, if I hear what he says, this stays with me, and I realize after some time that what I've listened to helps me changing, step by step, my point of view. Unintentionally, your viewpoint starts changing. Change becomes constant and becomes a change also in practice. Then you learn the relationship, impari la relazione. With those men there is affection, friendship. You learn the relationship of listening and respect. This, which means the group, is almost a place of training. You can see that he's very enthusiastic about this. And yes, this is very positive about it. So the first change engendered by the practice of speaking as men, so raccontarsi come uomini, affects the quality of men's sociality, homosociality, try to reconfigure the unsocial relationship contract, which contribute to keeping a silence on hegemonic masculinity in place. So it's not only on the content of this, the content of the discussions among men, but on the practice also itself. What happens, or at least what some of the members of Maschile Plurale claim to do by telling their own experiences in groups is starting from the silence, visualizing it, filling this up with men's voices and gender awareness. We could say that raccontarsi a partire da sé gives voice to men's silence about themselves as gendered. In this way, it allows men to see their own experiences as gendered, historically located, in a reflexive way, and provides them with the awareness of their partial views. The focus on male partiality, la parzialità maschile, is a recurring element also within the interviews I carried out with my informants. For instance, the same interviews before said, I see any question I'm confronted with the filter of gender difference, differenza di genere, of male partiality, parzialità maschile, and so this is for me the fundamental paradigm. As a result, the gender-neutral position of absolute masculinity can be deconstructed, and men unpack the dynamic of power underpinning gender relationships and the relations among masculinities. Transformations are stimulated with the emphasis on visualizing parzialità maschile, because with this practice men can situate themselves as gender and analyze men's practices starting from their own. As Stefano Ciccone, during a discussion group in Rome, commented on the productive outcomes of raccontarsi come uomini a partire da sé. And here in this quote, alternatives in men practices can arise from men's awareness of their own gender-embodied subjectivity, identità sessuata, and of the cultural history that influenced and partly shaped their self-perceptions and practices of masculinity. Now I'd like to take a quick look at two different cases in which this approach, partire da sé, is visible and it's also transformative because it creates something. The first case is the Appello contro la violenza sulle donne of 2006. And this is the moment in which Maschile Plurale managed to collect a very big mobilization of men, and then after that it became a national association. So the title of this event was La violenza sulle donne ci riguarda, prendiamo la parola come uomini. Going back to the case of men fighting violence against women, with this campaign in 2006 we could see that in their approach men are addressed as gendered and are asked to visualize male violence, violenza maschile, not as an eccentric or pathological situation, but rather looking at this phenomenon with a gender lens, willing to see the social, cultural norms that allow the gender of this violence to be silenced, and saying, la violenza maschile come uomo mi riguarda. And from there, start a process of self-reflection on one's own expressions of male violence within one's own personal relationships. So the partire da sé is like transports from traveling from the practice of the group to the square, to the political demonstrations and to relationships of violence in one's own life. The second example I wanted to show you very quickly is it's precisely where my title comes from, and it's the case of the national meeting that was organized at the end of 2011, which was entitled Il caos che resta in noi, la crisi della politica come questione maschile. And this meeting was organized right after the end of Berlusconi government, and the title already expressed the way in which a gendered approach is used in relation to the norms and models of masculinities promoted with gender culture and politics in what we call the age of Berlusconi. The way the critique moves on, therefore, is keeping the focus on the partire d'assè, on the self-reflexive motion, in order not to distance what other men do and I don't do because I'm a feminist man or because I want to be critical, but more like the question, what do I share with this gender politics and culture, and what do we have in common with the models supported by Berlusconi government? So what is the gender culture that I share with him? Where is to what extent Berlusconi is inside myself? This is kind of the question. I cannot change starting from myself again. How much time is it?
4 minutes.
Okay. To sum up, in the case of maschile plurale, for the first time in the Italian context, men seek to become aware of the historically located gender experience and envision their partial perspectives. My question as a researcher is what is my interest? What can this engender on a personal, political, and epistemological level? On the level of epistemology, by highlighting the necessary partiality of every vision a partire da sé, maschile plurale can engender an epistemological move from abstract masculinity to partial views. On a personal and political level, this move can lead to reflect on men's gender locations to embodiment and personal relationship with children, or for example thinking about fatherhood or reconfiguring relationships among other masculinities in politics, migration politics, and environmentalism, whatever. Everything can be reconfigured. Starting with rethinking their relationship as political. Masculinity becomes both the object and subject of reflection at different levels, epistemological, cultural, political, and this critical creative moment contributes to maschile plurale efforts in questioning and changing men's practices. And the motto is, tutto questo mi riguarda, tutto questo ci riguarda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krizia, and you even have a little time left, which is amazing.